For our next project, we're going to be creating screen-printed music posters featuring your favorite musician or your favorite band. We're going to be taking inspiration from the musical posters of the 1960s. Back in the 1960s, San Francisco was a creative hub for musical artists, for musicians, for political activists, and for graphic designers. We had a group of graphic designers known as the Big Five: Wes Wilson, Victor Moscasco, Alton Kelly, and Stanley Mouse. They were known for a certain type of poster that was created, and most of the posters from the 1960s were created by these Big Five artists. A lot of musical artists like Janis Joplin and the Grateful Dead also lived in the San Francisco area, so you'll see a lot of posters that are created for those bands and those musicians. When we're talking about the 1960s posters, there's a lot of characteristics that make them the 1960s posters that people always refer to. So some of those characteristics are brightly contrasting colors. So a lot of times there's colors that you wouldn't necessarily put together. A lot of times they feature complementary colors. So remember, think about your color wheel when you have color opposites. Like in this poster, we have orange and blue next to each other. And we also have very bright and vivid colors that are here. So we really up the saturation on these posters. You're also going to see very, very flowing, curved, spiralized typography. That word typography is a long word that just means the type of type that's there. In other words, when you think about when you're working on like a Google Doc, it's the font that you're choosing. So the way that the words appear, the way that the words are shaped, they're very warped and they change size a lot. They're skewed. They look like they're smushed in some directions and things like that. You also are going to see an illustration style that shows just solid colors. So you see very little quote unquote shading. And what I mean by that is a broad value scale. We don't see light grays, medium grays, dark grays. When we see a light and we see a dark, whether it be in the color or in the value or both that we're looking at. A lot of times these musical posters have the word psychedelic attached to them. When we say that they're psychedelic, what we mean by that is that you have very vivid colors, you have swirling abstract patterns, and it almost looks as if you are looking through a kaleidoscope, sort of giving the viewers a little bit of a trippy feeling. Now, these 1960s posters, they didn't just come out of nowhere. The 1960s graphic designers were very heavily influenced by an older art movement called Art Nouveau. So Art Nouveau was a very short art movement. It only lasted from 1890 to 1910, but the impact has been very profound over the decades that it's existed. You guys can see right here that Art Nouveau pretty much touched all different types of art. It touched a bunch of furniture, different types of cityscapes, buildings, stained glass, illustrations in books. And here, if you guys end up going to Washington, D.C., there actually is Art Nouveau all on the ceilings of the Library of Congress. Some characteristics of Art Nouveau is a technique that's, or not really a technique, but a sort of design that's called whiplash. So if you can imagine taking something and whipping it, basically the movement of that line is what is in display in Art Nouveau. So this very back and forth line that you see here, it's almost as this line has been whipped across the page. Art Nouveau also features a lot of floral designs, stylized fruit and vegetable designs, curving forms that are inspired by lilies, vines, flower stems, just a lot of fluidity in the work that you see. Now, another source of inspiration for the psychedelic music posters was an artist named Alphonse Mucha. Now I'm going to show you almost a direct copy from the artist Alphonse Mucha on the next slide. So this guy right here, Alphonse Mucha, is one of my favorite artists in the whole entire world. His work is just absolutely mind-blowing to me, but I want you guys to see very, very clearly how, especially if you look at this Job one, look at how much the 1960s Big Five adapted from that Mucha. It's almost a direct copy. Of course, we have those bright colors that are added in. We have the super contrast. You don't have the subtle shading that Mucha has in here. And we have things a little bit less crazy over ornately detailed like Mucha does. So a little bit about Alphonse Mucha. He was a Czech painter, an illustrator, a graphic artist, and a printmaker. When he started his career, he actually started in advertising. He actually made advertisements for Nestle chocolate, Job cigarettes, different bicycle companies, even champagne companies. He also worked on many theatrical posters for plays and musicals. He slowly moved on to making his own work, featuring more tall and skinny decorative panels that were basically, he was just making art for people to put in their homes. He made them for a really great price, and people loved the style of his work, and they wanted to show it off and put it for display. He started to make his own series. So in these long panels that he would do, he would make 4 of them that were all part of a similar theme. So he would use themes like gemstones, the arts, and the 4 seasons. This one right here is part of the arts series, and this lady is dance. If there's any Sailor Moon fans out there, this particular illustration actually inspired how Sailor Moon stands in the show. Later in his life, he made more conceptual art that was connected to the struggles of his people called the Slav epic. It took him almost 20 years. It was a very deep and personal piece to him. So some characteristics of Alphonse Mucha's works that you'll also see in the 1960s posters. He always usually had a halo, either a full circle or a partial halo or crescent behind his figures. His space was broken up, so you would have the figure standing here, and most of the time it was a very beautiful woman, but he would also break up the background into sort of like strange shapes. Normally artists would just kind of keep this as a border, but he broke it up into these very organic shapes that kind of broke the picture up a little bit in that panel. He also always had the hair curling in very fluid forms. He had decorative floral designs and tons and tons and tons of detailed line work and very subtle shading. But you can see, if you zoom in on your Chromebooks, you can see how much line work is just in one little piece of hair that he's doing. So why are we doing this project? Because our Art Nouveau, Alphonse Mucha, 1960s posters are everywhere right now. You guys are literally walking through the halls. These are pictures I took of students wearing work that is inspired by 1960s posters. Similar fonts, similar ways that the typography curves around things, similar framing of things. Lots of t-shirts right now are being used for this type of illustration, and then lots of pop culture things, like down here is Sailor Moon, and here are the Disney princesses. They're being reinvented in an Art Nouveau, Alphonse Mucha, 1960s style. The new Fantastic Beasts movies, they take place in the 1920s, and the last one, or the second to last one, it actually took place in Paris. So there's Art Nouveau everywhere around. So it really is everywhere. All right, now it's time for you guys to start planning out your own musical posters. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to list at least 6 musicians or bands that you would like to make a poster for. Please make sure that you actually, enjoy this person's music, because you're going to be working on this for a certain length of time and you want to enjoy the work that you're doing. After you've listed off 6, decide which one you think would make a really cool poster that has these 1960 and Art Nouveau influences in it. I made the choice of Florence and the Machine because when I look at my whole list here, and when I looked at reference photos of her, she really kind of fits the bill for 1960s style. She's very hippy-dippy. She has really long hair. She's just really awesome and really cool. So then you have some decisions to make as we go down here. So when you're talking about the persons or the figures that are going to be in your work, you need to decide, do you want it to be a portrait, meaning that we just see a face? Do you want it to be a torso, which this is a good picture of, like kind of like a partial torso here? Or do you want the whole entire body to be pictured of your band or your musician that you choose? You've got to decide what's going to be the best for your particular poster. You also need to decide what you want your text on your musical poster to say. Do you want it to have the name of your musician or band, places that they've played, maybe some lyrics to their song? It's up to you how much text you want to include on your musical poster, but we at least want the name of your musician or band to be on the poster. Then you need to decide what kind of typography you want to do. Remember, typography is the type that goes across it. You need to decide, do you want to do something like a swirl where the letters are, the type is actually like going in a circle? Do you want to just have the type that's curved, maybe even curving around your figure? Do you want the type to change size? So like right here, pretty much all of this typography is the same height, but then we look at some other posters and we see that the typography is very skinny, gets a little bit fatter, goes back to skinny. Same on this one. We have huge letters for the Grateful Dead, and then we get smaller as we go down. So you've got to decide. You can also do a combination of things. That's why it says and or. I even started to kind of like sketch to the side what I thought would look cool for Florence and the Machine. You need to decide if you want a border or no border. There's no requirement to do a border, but some people like the way a border looks because it sort of contains the text and the image that you have. List any other imagery besides the portrait or typography. So if your musician or band, if they play an instrument and you want to include that, or if there's a symbol that represents them, Florence always has like flowers and things in her hair, so I would definitely want to make sure I'm including flowers. And I really love the Art Nouveau whiplash that I described earlier. With colors, you're going to be doing analogous colors for this. They're going to be very bright neon colors, so you want to make sure we're using analogous because we're going to mix them a little bit as they go through the screen. So then that way we avoid creating any like dark browns or anything like that. So I'm going to go for 3 colors. I feel like 3 is a very balanced, and I went ahead and listed the analogous colors here for you and what you could choose. So I'm choosing green, blue, and purple. Florence uses those cool tones a lot. And then the next decision, we have to explain it a little bit. So we've got to talk again about positive and negative space. Positive space is usually black space, and negative space is white space. With screens, the way that this will work is anything that is black is going to get printed. So that means that all the black parts of this Florence and the Machine, and also over here, those are going to get ink on them, and that'll be transferred to my paper. Anything that's white will be blocked out. So you've got to decide, okay, do I want to have white letters and my subject with a printed background? So that would be this option right here. My letters are white, Florence is mostly white, and my elements are white here. And this whole background would be printed, but all the white areas would be blocked. So that's one option. So basically, your letters and your figure are going to be the white of the paper. On this second option, you would have all these letters, all of this elements over here, and Florence, those would all be colored. All of these white areas would stay the white of the paper. This is usually just how positive and negative space people traditionally think of it. This is called positive negative space reversal if you want to be fancy. But we tried to make it really simple for you guys. So your 2 options are white letters and subject and a printed background, or printed letters and subject with a white background. We know that this is confusing. We'll help you guys through this as you go. Now, on the back, you need to have 4 different designs of ways that you think that your music poster should be composed. I want all 4 designs to look different from each other. I want you to kind of stretch your creativity, your imagination a little bit. As you're looking at the reference photo of the person that you choose, make sure that you're saving the pictures that you're actually looking at so you don't have to keep searching for them again and again. When you are doing these sketches, please don't be like precious with the sketching. We're going to be doing a digital image that we use Google Docs and Canva for. So don't take forever to plan out these designs. Keep it really loose. Keep it really sketchy. You're just kind of like planning out where you want the type to go and where you want your figure to go. And then maybe start to make some of those decisions about, okay, what's going to be white, what's going to be black, what's going to be printed, what's not going to be printed. All right, let's actually talk about what screen printing is. This is going to help you understand this part of it a little bit better when you're talking about your white and your black designs. Even though we're using color eventually, when we're planning out the design, we focus on white means blocked, black means printed. And when you actually have a screen, this is a little Niffler, it's a Harry Potter creature. When I originally made this, black was everywhere that you see open in this screen, and white is everywhere where you see this kind of aquamarine glue that's on here. So with actual screen printing, the material is literally a screen. It's a mesh material of a very fine tooth that allows ink to be pressed and passed through it, which will then transfer your image to a piece of paper. So with this sort of screen printing, what we do is anywhere that's white on our design, so back to my Florence designs, anywhere that's white, I'm going to put Mod Podge. And what the Mod Podge does is it basically creates like a plastic, a polymer, and it doesn't let any ink go through the screen. Anywhere that's black, I don't touch. I leave it completely open, and then that is where ink will go through my screen and become whatever color I want to. If I make more than one print, I could change the color of the Niffler to pink or silver or gold, whatever I wanted to do. So very basically, I'm just going to demonstrate for you guys what screen printing looks like. Voila! I now have a psychedelic colored Niffler. Ta-da!